Hello students, welcome to Learn English through English. My name is John Samuel and I teach English. And this video is for Tamilnadu State Board students for 10th standard English. And okay, today we'll be learning Unit 2 Prose. And before we begin with the topic, let me discuss something. Okay, now, please read this. Okay, what it is, you might be wondering. No, I thought this is a board and I was writing on my computer screen. And you might be thinking that, it's very weird, and you might be thinking that, sir, you should be in Kilpauk Hospital, if I try to teach the whole lesson like this. Okay, that's how it happens, when something is not there exactly. And you imagine, like I imagined that it was a whiteboard and I was writing through that, and I ruined my computer screen. That's what it happens. Exactly, when you walk in a dark, when it's night and it's very dark and you are afraid to walk alone and all, and you imagine, there might be some creepy insects or ghost or something, and you will be very much afraid to walk on, which is not there. You imagine and you get afraid of that. The same thing we are going to learn now about an author's childhood. The same kind of incident happens which was not there, and he imagined as if it was there, and that ended up in a very funny way. Okay, now turn your textbook to page number 30. And okay, let me introduce the author. The author is James Grover Thurber, and this lesson is an extract from his book, My Life and Hard Times. It was his fictional biography. He wrote about his childhood. And James Grover Thurber, is a very humorist writer, author, and he's also a cartoonist. He is from America. And I want to tell you about something about his childhood. When he was young, and when he was playing with his brother accidentally shot an arrow on one of his eye, and he lost his eyesight. Many such things he had written on My Life and Hard Times. It's a very good book. And this lesson which we are going to learn, The Night That Ghost Got In, is just an extract from the book. And during his childhood he imagined something which was not there, and due to his over imagination it hilariously ended and in breaking a window pane, and his grandfather shot a patrolman. Okay, now let's start with the lesson. Textbook page number 30. Let's start with the lesson. Unit 2 Prose, The Night the Ghost Got In. Author James Grover Thurber. Okay, now I want all my students to be ready with a pencil and open your textbook to page number 30. And whenever I teach, you should note down the meaning or important thing, whatever you want to note down. Not only for learning English, whatever you learn, if you note it down, it will be very helpful to you. Unit 2 Prose, The Night the Ghost Got In, by James Grover Thurber. The ghost that got into our house on the night of November 1715 raised such a hullabaloo of misunderstandings that I'm sorry I didn't just let it keep on walking and go to bed. Its advent caused my mother to throw a shoe through a window of the house next door and ended up with my grandfather shooting a patrolman. I'm sorry, therefore, as I have said, that I ever paid any attention to the footsteps. Okay, students, let's note down the meaning. The word hullabaloo, the correct pronunciation.
Hullabaloo.
It's a uproar or fuss, any commotion creating. Note down the example. The announcement caused quite a hullabaloo. The next word, advent. Advent means arrival. A usage, a sentence. The 20th century saw the advent of many important inventions, including televisions, computers, and microwave. And one more meaning, patrolman. That's junior policeman who will be on rounds for observation. this might be this might be a very memorable incident in the life of the author, during his childhood. That's why he even clearly remembers the date, November 17, 1915. Okay, so we are going to learn what happened on the night of November 17, 1915. He says, it created the arrival of ghost created a lot of misunderstanding, and he regrets, that you should have let it go and you should have not considered that. You should have went to the bed. And as I said, that ended up with his mother threw a shoe through a window of the house next door, and his grandfather shot a patrolman. And he again, he regrets that he should have not paid any attention of the footsteps. Now, whose footstep is it? Is it the ghost? Let's read the next paragraph. Second paragraph. They began about 1:15 o'clock in the morning, a rhythmic, quick cadenced walking around the dining room table. My mother was asleep in one room upstairs, my brother Herman in another. Grandfather was in the attic, in the old walnut bed which, as you will remember, once fell on my father. I had just stepped out of the bathtub and was busily rubbing myself with a towel when I heard the steps. They were the steps of a man walking rapidly around the dining table downstairs. The light from the bathroom shone down the back steps, which dropped directly into the dining room. I could see the faint shine of plates on the plate rail. I couldn't see the table. The steps kept going round and round the table at regular intervals. A board creaked when it was trod upon. I supposed at first that it was my father or my brother Roy, who had gone to Indianapolis but were expected home at any time. I suspected next that it was a burglar. It did not enter my mind until later that it was a ghost. Okay, note on the meaning. 1:15, that is 1:15 a.m. and whenever it is 1:15 we say 1:15. Rhythmic means equal interval of time. And then cadence is a sequence of musical phrase. If you walk, that makes a kind of a musical phrase. And then creaking, board creaking, when you step on wooden board, it creates a scratching or squeaking noise. That. And attic is a portion between the ceiling and the roof. At some place, they use the space between ceiling and the roof, to keep some things and all. If it is large enough, some people can afford, to be to afford for children or grand old people. Okay. And next, Indianapolis. Indianapolis is the capital city of the state Indiana, in USA. As the time was 1:15, we can consider it as early morning or midnight, where it will be very dark. And the author heard a rhythmic, quick cadence walking around the dining room table, which is downstairs. And okay, now who are all in the house? The mother was asleep in one room upstairs, and brother Herman in another, and grandfather was in the attic and in the old walnut bed. Here is mentioning once fell on my father. That means he had already discussed about this bed in My Life and Hard Times, his childhood fictional autobiography. Okay. And so the author had just stepped out of the bathtub and he was busily rubbing himself with the towel, and then he heard the steps. Dark night, 1:15, and somebody's walking, and it's the steps of a man walking rapidly around the dining room table. And as it is night, all lights may be switched off, only his light from the bathroom. As his room is close to the stairs, the light can be shown down the back steps, and it went into the dining room, and he could see the faint shine of plates on the plate rail, but he couldn't see the table. And the steps kept going round and round, and at regular intervals, it made a creaking sound, and when it was trod upon. And then now the author, when he heard, he thought, who it might be, and then he thought it might be his father or brother Roy. They both, they are not at home, they are at Indianapolis, which is the capital city of state Indiana, and they can they are expected at home at any time. And then at your house, if somebody is coming, and if it's your brother or father or somebody at your family member, you will come to know. If it's your father, he will go directly to his room, and if it's your brother or mother or something, they will directly go to kitchen or something and all. You can understand, but he can't feel that it might be his father or brother. It should not be. Why they will go there? So it's not them. And then he thought it might be a burglar. If they are not at home, then it might be a burglar. And then he thought, what a burglar need to do in the dining room? And then it came into his mind that it's night time and it might be a ghost. If it's not father, it's not brother, and if it's not a burglar, then who it may be? It might be a ghost. After the walking had gone on for perhaps 3 minutes, I tiptoed to Herman's room. I hissed in the dark, shaking him. "Oh," he said in the low, hopeless tone of a despondent beagle. He always half suspected that something would get him in the night. I told him who I was. "There's something downstairs," I said. He got up and followed me to the head of the back staircase. The steps had ceased. Herman looked at me in some alarm. I had only the bath towel around my waist. He wanted to go back to bed. I gripped his arm. Students, note down the meaning. Tiptoe means to walk quietly and carefully. During night when everything is dark, you walk stealthily, without disturbing anyone. So that is tiptoe, walking without making any noise. And despondent beagle. Beagle is a breed of dog, and despondent means which is very much afraid, which lack of hope. So that is despondent beagle. Around for 3 minutes, he could hear the walking noise, and then after that, when it stopped or paused, James tiptoed, walked very carefully without making any noise to Herman's room, and he called him. And he hissed, in that dark, and he shook him. And I want to tell you about something about Herman. Herman is very afraid, and particularly during night, that something could get him. So he was sleeping, very afraid. And when he made that noise, James made that noise, still, he doesn't want to look here and there. And then when James shook him, he got afraid and up. And then, James is asking the person who is very much afraid during night that there is something downstairs, and he want him to follow him to check. And Herman, they both went to the head of the backstairs, at the top. And now the steps had ceased. Ceased means stopped, the sound. So Herman looked at him, and then he want to move. I want to mention something, that James still, he was in his bath towel. And now Herman want to go back to bed, as there was no noise, but James is not ready to allow him to go, so he gripped his arm. Okay, now we'll read the next next paragraph. Okay. There is something down there, I said. Instantly the steps began again. Circled the dining room table like a man running, and started up the stairs towards us, heavily, 2 at a time. The light still shone palely down the stairs. We saw nothing coming, we only heard the steps. Herman rushed to his room and slammed the door. I slammed shut the door at the stairs top and held my knee against it. After a long time, I slowly opened it again. There was nothing there. There was no sound. None of us ever heard the ghost. Okay, so when he stopped him, then he asked him, there's something down there, and suddenly the steps began again. And now this time, the step was circling the dining room table like a man running, and then the steps started stepping up the stairs heavily, two at a time, and two steps at a time, and the light still shone palely down the stairs. And here they are not able to see anything coming up, but they could hear the sound. Then who it may be? And then they were very much afraid. Herman rushed to his room and slammed the door, and even the author James, he slammed shut the door, and he was very much afraid, so he was holding the door which is with his knee. And after a long minute, then they slowly opened it again to check who it was. There was nothing there, there was no sound, and after that none of them ever heard the ghost again. Okay, now let's check the meanings. Okay, students, you note down the meaning. Slam, to shut with force. Aroused, awaken. Okay, now this meaning you will be needing in the next paragraph. Okay, let's read the next paragraph. The slamming of the doors had aroused mother. She peered out of her room. What on earth are you boys doing? She demanded. Herman ventured out of his room. Nothing, he said gruffly, but he was in color, a light green. What was all that running around downstairs? Said mother. So she had heard the steps too. We just looked at her. Burglars, she shouted, intuitively. I tried to quieten her by starting lightly downstairs. So, note down the meaning. Aroused, to awaken. Peer means to look. And ventured, here it means to, daring to come out. And gruffly means rough or hoarse voice. Next word, intuitively, that means perspective, insight, somebody getting that feeling, they are getting that kind of insight. Okay, here the correct pronunciation. Intuitively. Okay, now in the paragraph which we read. Okay, now when Herman went to his room and slammed the door, and even the author James did the same thing. Now this noise aroused mother, and she came out and looked, and she asked, what on earth are you boys doing? What are you doing here during this night time? And they said nothing. And Herman looked kind of afraid, and then she asked, what all that running around downstairs? That means these two boys understood that not only them, even mom heard the voice, but who was coming up upstairs? No, they were not able to see anyone, but they heard the noise, and mother too heard the noise. That means there was someone who walked on the stairs. And then when mom was thinking around that, then she got a feeling like it might be burglar. She shouted, and to make her quiet, now James, he started lighting and lightly downstairs. He want to go down and check because somebody is shouting that burglar, so he want to take some do something, so he tried to move out. Okay, now we'll read the next paragraph. Come on, Herman, I said. I'll stay with the mother, he said. She's all excited. I stepped back onto the landing. Don't either of you go a step, said mother. We'll call the police. Since the phone was downstairs, I didn't see how we were going to call the police. Nor did I want the police. But mother made one of her quick, incomparable decisions. She flung up a window of her bedroom, which faced the bedroom windows of the house of a neighbor, picked up a shoe and whammed it through a pane of glass across the narrow space that separated the two houses. Glass tinkled into the bedroom, occupied by a retired engraver named Bodwell and his wife. Bodwell had been for some years in rather a bad way and was subject to mild attacks. Almost everybody we knew or lived near had some kind of attacks. Note on the meaning. Wham means forceful blow, and heave means throw, and enormously means greatly, flung means to throw, and engrave is a profession who cuts designs or woods on metal, glass or wood, especially making a name plate or something to engrave on something. Okay, that's a engraver. Okay, now Herman is not ready to come down, but James somehow needs to, he is very confirmed, he is very much assured that it's a ghost, he is sure about that, and so he is to make his mother quiet, he was about to get down, and then the mother said, no, nobody will go down, because the mother asked to call. And so when James was about to go down, he called Herman also, come, we'll go down and we'll check what it is. And Herman was very afraid of anything. He said, no, you go, I'll stay with mother because she's very excited, she's very much afraid, I'll comfort her, you carry on. And the mom warned, don't either of you go a step, that she decided to call the police, because she thought it's a burglar. And but how will they call the police? The phone is in the downstairs, and the mom said nobody will go down. And then the mother came up with a quick decision. One second. Then mom came up with the idea. She went to her room, to her bedroom, and near the window she took a shoe and whammed it through the window, and in the other side of the window, after a narrow space, it was the window of the next neighbor, next neighbor's bedroom. And then the glass tinkled, made some noise, and it went to the neighbor's bedroom. And about the neighbor, he was a retired engraver, and his name is Bodwell, and he lived with his wife. And everyone knows around that Bodwell is subject to some mild attacks. Almost everyone who lived there, they had some kind of attack. So a person who is having a mild attack, during night she threw a shoe throughout the on the bedroom window. Okay, now we'll read the next paragraph. Okay. It was now about 2 o'clock of a moonless night. Clouds hung black and low. Bodwell was at the window in a minute, shouting, frothing a little, shaking his fist. We'll sell the house and go back to Peoria, we could hear Mrs. Bodwell saying. It was some time before mother got through to Bodwell. Burglars, she shouted. Burglars in the house. Herman and I hadn't dared to tell her that it was not burglars but ghosts, for she was even more afraid of ghosts than of burglars. Bodwell at first thought that she meant there were burglars in his house, but finally quieted down and called the police for us over an extension phone by his bed. After he had disappeared from the window, mother suddenly made as if to throw another shoe, not because there was further need of it, but as she later explained, because the thrill of heaving a shoe through a window glass had enormously taken her fancy. I prevented her. Okay, now it was about 2 o'clock for moonless night. Means it's very dark, and even the clouds were little dark. So when mother threw the shoes and she shouted, burglars. Now Bodwell, somebody, just think about Bodwell. He was sleeping and somebody threw a shoe on the breaking the window and shouting, burglar, burglar. So he thought burglar is in his house. So then he was like, okay, so you call the police. and then mother made him understand that not in his house, but the burglar is in their house. So then before that he was very much afraid, and as his window was broken, he was shouting, frothing a little and shaking his fist, and his wife was telling, we'll sell the house and go back to Peoria because we are not able to live in peace here. Okay, then finally Bordwell, he was still afraid, he didn't went down. Through the extension phone by his bed, he called, and after he had disappeared from the window, now the mother is ready to throw the next shoe. And later author asked what it is about, why you want to throw the shoes again. She said it was nice throwing the shoe, and she wanted to throw more, and she was enormously greatly taken by that fancy. And then somehow James stopped her. Okay, we'll read the next paragraph. The police were on hand in a commendably short time. A Ford sedan, full of them, 2 on motorcycles, and a patrol wagon with about 8 in it, and a few reporters. They began banging at a front door. Flashlights shot streaks of gleam up and down the walls, across the yard, down the walk between our house and Bordwell's. "Open up!" cried a hoarse voice. "We are men from headquarters." I wanted to go down and let them in, since that they were, but mother wouldn't hear of it. "You haven't a stitch on," she pointed out. "You would catch your death." I wound the towel around me again. Finally the cops put their shoulders to our big heavy front door with its thick beveled glass and broke it in. I could hear a rending of wood and a splash of glass on the floor of the hall. Their lights played all over the living room and crisscrossed nervously in the dining room, stabbed into hallways, shot up the French stairs, and finally up the back. They caught me standing in my towel at the top. A heavy policeman bounded up the steps. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I live here," I said. Okay, now the police were on hand. They reached within a short time. That means appreciatively. Commendably means admirably. They reached, and okay, note on the meaning. Streaks means flashes, and crisscross means overlap. Somebody is flashing a torch here, somebody here, it crisscross overlap, that's it. Okay, now now the cops were there within short time, and who all came? A Ford sedan, a cab full of cops, and 2 on motorcycles, and a patrol wagon. It's a huge wagon, about 8 in it. 8 of them were in it, and along with the police, a few reporters also came. Might be the police want to show, to witness it with the reporters and note down, how great job they are doing in catching thief, burglar. Okay, so they banged at the door. The door was locked, and the flashlights here and there, everywhere, they flashed light, and okay, now one cop he cried, he shouted, "Open up, we are men from headquarters, we are cops." And now James is very much sure that there's no thief inside, no burglar inside, so he want to go down and open the door as police has arrived, but mother wouldn't hear of it. She was very much afraid, because she was still thinking that it might be a burglar. So she pointed out, now when James was ready to go and check what it is, now mom pointed out that you don't dare go down. There's you haven't a stitch on, you don't have a stitch, cloth, you are not wearing any clothes, so you would catch your death. And then this reminded him that he was still wearing the towel, so he wrapped around his waist again. And then, as nobody was ready to open the door, the cops put their shoulders to the big heavy front door, and the beveled glass is a kind of a glass which in the edges it is flattened, and then they could hear a rending of wood, all the breaking the door, and inside with the torchlight, flashlight, they were checking here and there, who is there and all. And then now just imagine a cop who is checking the staircase from the down, he is taking his flashlight to the top, and there a boy was standing with just a towel. And then he asked, who are you? And then he said, I live here. Okay. The officer in charge reported to mother, no sign of nobody, lady, he said. Must have got away. What did he like? There were 2 or 3 of them, mother said, whooping and carrying on, slamming doors. Funny, said the cop. All your windows and door was locked on the inside, tight as a tick. So the officer, one of the police officer, was stated to reported to mom that he is not able to find anyone, and they might have escaped. He mentioned, and he asked how we looked like, and she said that what she know was there were 2 or 3 of them. They were making noise, carrying on, slamming the doors. And the cop said it's very funny because all the windows and door was locked on the inside, tight as a tick, so there is no possible, so that's what he said, it's funny. Okay, downstairs we could hear the tromping of the other police. Police were all over the place. Doors were yanked open, drawers were yanked open, windows were shot up and pulled down, furniture fell with dull thumps. A half-dozen policemen emerged out of the darkness of the front hallway upstairs. They began to ransack the floor, pulled beds away from the walls, tore clothes off hooks in the closets, pulled suitcases and boxes off shelves. One of them found an old zither that Roy had won a pool tournament. Look here, Joe, he said, strumming it with a big paw. The cop named Joe took it and turned it over. What is it? He asked me. It's an old zither our guinea pig used to sleep on, I said. It was true that a pet guinea pig we once had would never sleep anywhere except on the zither, but I should never have said so. Joe and the other cop looked at me a long time. They put the zither back on a shelf. Okay, let's see the explanations. Okay, before explaining this, I would like to share a short story, an incident which happened in my village during my childhood. Okay, once in our village at a home, they saw a snake inside the family. They were shocked and they screamed. When the lady screamed, all the people inside that house, they came outside and started running here and there, shouting, there's a snake in a house, snake in a house. And the whole village, men and women, they gathered, they took the stick. At village, others, many people are not afraid of the snake and they want to kill it, so they took what all they got in their hand, and they went inside rushed into the home. And what happened inside the house? They started searching here and there, in the kitchen, below this bed, cot, or everywhere. And also they opened the cupboard, and what happened after a few minutes? All were looking, all the ladies were like, oh, nice sarees. They were checking the wardrobe, nice sarees and all, and what kind of jewels they have. They started opening everything, and I remember the same thing here when I read this, and when the officer was talking to the mom, that he is not able to see anywhere, and down the other police officers, they were raiding their house. They were checking everything, opening everything and all. And at an incident, one man, he also saw a musical instrument. Why they are at that place, searching the thief. And but here they are opening the shelves, the closet. Closet is the cupboard where they keep the books, or some people even used to keep their dress. And there was a music instrument which Roy won in a pool tournament, and one cop was showing, here, look here, Joe, and he was strumming it, means playing the stringed instrument with a big paw, that is with his hand. And they were having a nice chit chat, they were whiling away the time there. and during that time, the author James, he was not able to keep his mouth shut, and he was explaining them. It's an old zither, and their guinea pig, ones which they had, used to sleep in that. Now there is no reason to state that, and the police officer were looking, so like, James, like, is he mad or somewhat, and this is the music instrument zither, how it looks like. There is a picture in the textbook also. And this is a guinea pig. Guinea pig is not a pig, it's a white rat, mouse, and it will not have a tail. People used to keep it as a pet. It will not have a tail. It's a rodent, and don't think it as a pig. Okay. And now they were looking, once James, like, is he mad or what? No, because he is giving all the information to the police, which is not needed actually. Here the lesson we need to learn, that we need to keep our mouth shut when there is no need of it, and we may know something, and there are, at certain times we need to keep our mouth shut, and otherwise we will be considered as, we will be a fool in front of others. Okay, now let's learn the next paragraph. No sign or nothing, said the cop who had first spoken to mother. The lady seems hysterical. They all nodded, but said nothing, just looked at me. In the small silence, we all heard a creaking in the attic. Grandfather was turning over in bed. What's that? Snapped Joe. 5 or 6 cops sprang for the attic door before I could intervene or explain. I realized that it would be bad if they burst in on grandfather unannounced or even announced. He was going through a phase in which he believed that General Meade's men, under steady hammering by Stonewall Jackson, were beginning to retreat and even desert. Okay, now all the cops searched, and they were not able to get anything, and they all said to each other, no sign or nothing, not able to find, there is no sign that even, if anybody enters the house, there will be some sign, even if anyone comes from outside. So he said he's not able to find anyone. So that was the same cop who first spoke to the mother, and he also said that the lady seems hysterical. Now hysterical means overexcited or hyper. Even there is nothing, they make even a small thing into a big issue. So she's hysterical, and all the other nodded. They just nodded, and they didn't speak anything. Why? Because they all know that James, the son of that lady, is still standing there, and it's not good to talk ill about his mother in front of him. So then there was a silence, and when they all looked at him, and in that silence they heard a creaking sound, some sound from the attic. And now during that time, Joe, he quickly said, what's that? He snapped means saying something quickly and irritably. So he said, and as soon as Joe snapped, said, what's that? 5 or 6 cops rushed towards the attic door before James could stop them, intervene them, to prevent them from going upstairs, going to the attic. Okay, why James want to stop them? Because, grandfather, it is not a good idea to, burst in, to get into grandfather announced or even unannounced, or even announced, because he was going through a phase. He was not at the present. He was still thinking that he is during American Civil War, and General Meade's men, North Americans, they are deserting the war, and they are coming back to home, because from the South Americans, they are giving a steady fight, so they are deserting. That means the armies are leaving the camp, and they are heading towards their home. They don't want to fight, they are coming back, and grandfather is very angry with such army. So he is thinking that anytime you find someone, he is thinking that they are the army men, they are coming back from without fighting, so we need to shout and get them back. So that's what, deserting. Okay, now when I got to the attic, things were pretty confused. as soon as he stopped, before he could stop, things were confused, because grandfather had evidently jumped to the conclusion that the police were deserters from Mir's army trying to hide away in his attic. He bounded out of bed wearing a long flannel nightgown over long woolen pants, a nightcap, and a leather jacket around his chest. The cops must have realized at once that the indignant white-haired old man belonged to the house, but they had no chance to say so. "Back, ye cowardly dog," roared grandfather. "Back to the lines, you goddamn lily-livered cattle." With that, he fetched the officer, who found the zither a flat-handed smack alongside his head that sent him sprawling. The others beat a retreat, but not enough. Grandfather grabbed Zither's gun from its holster and let fly. The report seemed to crack the rafters. Smoke filled the attic. A cop cursed and shot his hand to shoulder. Somehow we all finally got downstairs again and locked the door against the old gentleman. He fired once or twice more in the darkness and then went back to bed. "That was grandfather," I explained to Joe, out of breath. "He thinks you're a deserter." "I'll say he does," said Joe. Before James could stop them, grandfather evidently, that is obviously, jumped into the conclusion that they are deserters. And grandfather was on his bed and he was wearing the nightgown and a cap. So by seeing grandfather, the cops were able to realize that this indignant, that is annoyed old man belonged to this house. He is not a thief. And but they had no chance to speak to the grandfather. Grandfather shouted at them, back to the lines, "You goddamn lily-livered cattle." That means you are cowards. You cowards, go back to, he roared, he shouted at them, "Go back, fight," because he is thinking that they are the army men. They deserted the camp and they are running to save their lives. So he is shouting, no, go, get back, fight against the South Americans. And with that, he gave a smack, to the head of, the other officer who found the zither, and sent him sprawling. He fell down, spread out his limbs, and he took the zither's gun. The officer whose name, who took the zither, they don't know the name, so that's what he is saying. The zither's gun from his holster. Holster is the leather strap, which they used to keep the gun. And and he started firing, and then he shot at the roof beams, and smoke filled the attic, and a cop, he shouted because someone, grandfather shot his hand to his shoulder, and they all came downstairs, and he fired once or twice more in the darkness, and then he went back to bed. Before they retreat, that means before they escape from there, it was too late. Grandfather got agitated and he shot one police officer, and when they came out, they almost saved their lives. They ran to save their lives when they came out, and then James, who was about to stop them, he should have stopped them getting into grandfather's attic, but now one was fired. There was a huge confusion and all came out. Now James is explaining, "That was grandfather. He thinks you are deserter." And then the officer said, "I'll say he does." Here all the confusion, or James is thinking, James thought that it was there is a ghost, and mom thought there is a burglar, and grandfather thought there is a deserter. Overall confusion, and it still continues. Let's see what's in the next paragraph. Okay, so I hope you all are noting down the meaning now. Okay, we'll read the next paragraph. The cops were reluctant to leave without getting their hand on somebody besides grandfather. The night had been distinctly a defeat for them. Furthermore, they obviously didn't like the layout. Something looked, and I can see their viewpoint phony. And they began to poke into things again. A reporter, a thin-faced, wispy man, came up to me. I had put on one of mother's dress. Not being able to find anything else, the reporter looked at me with mingled suspicion and interest. Just what the hell is the real lowdown here, Bert? He asked. I decided to be frank with him. We had ghosts, I said. He gazed at me a long time as if I were a slot machine into which he had, without results, dropped a coin. Then he walked away. The cops followed him. The one grandfather shot, holding his new bandaged arm, cursing and blaspheming. I'm gonna get my gun back from the old bird, said this is the cop. Yeah, said Joe. You and who else? I told them I would bring it to the station house the next day. Okay, students, note down the meaning. Now the cops were not ready to leave. They can't get into grandfather and have a fight. And besides grandfather, they want to, beat something. Usually the patrolmen, those who are at night, if they get anybody, they catch anybody, they beat them hard. So they want to beat something, or they want to catch the thief or something, but definitely it's a defeat for them. They were not able to get into anyone. And furthermore, and what happened, they started making excuse. They said the layout is not good, the way the house is there, structure is there, the plan and all this. They started blaming that, and James can see that they are making lame excuse, and they begin to investigate again, what happened, who heard this, that and all. And there was a reporter, a thin-faced, wispy man, very lean man, and he came up to James and he asked, I want to tell you, I told you that James was just wearing a towel, and now he was not able to. Now the police, they raided the house, they mixed up things here and there and all, so he was not able to get any dress, so he wore his mom's mother's dress. And as he was not able to find anything, and the reporter, the thin man, he was looking at James with mingled means blended, mixed of doubt and interest. And then he approached James and asked, what's the real lowdown? Lowdown means what the true fact, what's happening here, what's the true information. And James wants to be frank. He wants to be very honest with the reporter. So he stated, no, we had ghosts. And then he gazed at him for a long time as if he was a slot machine. Now, what is a slot machine? At some malls or somewhere, we used to put a coin or drop in money, and as soon as we drop money, we'll be expecting, the drink or whatever we selected should, it should come out. So if something, if you insert the coin, and as if it's a weight machine slot, and you are not getting any tickets or anything, you will be searching something. In the same way, the reporter was looking at James as if he was a slot machine, and he was expecting something to come out. And now as James was wearing his mother's dress, woman's dress, and this reporter had a interest on him, and so was looking at him very interestingly. And then he walked away. As he said that it was a ghost or something, he thought, what kind of a family is this? And the cops followed him, and the grandfather shot him. He was not ready to, he was cursing and he was blaspheming, he was shouting at grandfather. And then, the zither cop said, I'm gonna get my gun back from that old bird, anyhow I will get my gun, because for a police officer it's important to have their gun safe at them. They can't give to anybody and come out. So he said, somehow I will, they are accountable for that. So you want to get back the gun. And then Joe said, yeah, you will. Who else? Nobody is ready to go and help him. You want to go and get him. And James said, don't worry, I'll bring you to the station house the next day. Okay. Now, what is mom worried about? We'll read. What was the matter with that one policeman? Mother asked. After they had gone, grandfather shot him. I said, what for? She demanded. I told her he was a deserter. Of all things, said mother, he was such a nice looking young man. Now it's turning to be very funny. Now, as that zither cop was not ready to go back, he was shot and he wanted his gun back. And, mom asked, what happened? What's the matter with that policeman? And James replied, grandfather shot him. And she said, oh, after all, him, he was such a nice looking young man. She's saying he was, if you want to shoot, he should have shot someone else. But that cop, he was very nice looking young man. And, so the next paragraph, grandfather was fresh as a daisy and full of jokes at breakfast next morning. We thought at first he had forgotten all about what had happened, but he hadn't. Over his third cup of coffee, he glared at Herman and me. What was the idea of all them cops hooting around the house last night? He demanded. None of you bothered to have a bottle of water beside my bed? Do you ever realize what it cost for a thirsty man to look for water in the dining room last night? He had us that. Okay. Now, next morning, grandfather was very fresh. Here a phrase is used that he was fresh as a daisy. And then he was asking, first all of them thought, he was full of jokes and all, he was talking nicely. So all of them thought, that he forgot what happened last night, but he hadn't, because after having his third cup of coffee, he glared, he gazed at Herman and James, and he asked, what's the idea of all them cops hooting around the house last night? With this American slang, he asked, what happened that all the cops, they were making lots of noise, fuzz around the house last night. And then he said, none of you bothered to leave a bottle of water beside my bed. Nobody, at night you should have left a bottle of water around beside my bed to have a drink, to drink water at midnight. Do you realize what it cost? If you don't keep a bottle of water, what happened? Last night, what all happened when I went to the dining room and last night? Yeah, it was the grandfather. It's not the ghost, it's not the burglar and nobody else. It was the grandfather who was stepping up the staircase towards the attic. That's why they are not able to see anyone, but they can hear the noise. It was the grandfather. So, so lots of confusion here. And, this lesson is full of confusion. And first, Herman and James, they thought, the sound of the footstep was of ghost. And mom thought it was burglar. And policeman thought it was grandfather. And grandfather thought it was deserters in the house. So, lot of misunderstanding. This lesson is full of misunderstanding. And even one more misunderstanding. Even the reporter was looking at James, suspiciously, as if we had a special interest on him. He thought James is like, as in Tamil you used to say, Avana. That's what he was looking at him with suspicion, with kind of an interest. Okay, so that's about this lesson. And it's very humorous, very funny. And what I think I should leave a introduction and a conclusion for this lesson. Maybe in future, at the description or somewhere I will leave a list of introduction and all, and so that it will be very helpful for you. And if you have any doubt or anything, when you read the lesson, underline, have a pencil in your hand, underline what all you learn. And if you have any doubts or anything you come across, you can always ask your teacher, English teacher where you learn, or even if you need any help or anything, you can approach me. Okay, have a good day, enjoy the lesson. Thank you. Thanks for watching.